I'm just thrilled to have both of these writers here. And I had the opportunity to read work by both of them and get caught up on everything I wasn't familiar with. And seeing these themes weave in and out of their work together, I was kind of congratulating myself. What a great booking to have these two people here at the same time. You know, how'd you do that? And the fact is I didn't. It just happened. But I'm very happy about it. So let's start. Lorraine, I'm going to start this off with you. A question. Does writing really begin with the breath?
I fought that title so bad. I hate that title so much. I must have given like 200 alternative titles so that it wouldn't be that. And I hate it so much. And, and I have to admit they were right. And it does. So there you have it.
And how is that? Could you elaborate just a little bit? Without going into the whole presentation you would give at a conference or seminar.
Yeah, buy the book.
Well, buy the book, yeah, that goes without saying, you know.
You know, I think I realized it the most writing this last book. Because without that, without the breath, there aren't any words.
Okay. Lynn, your new poetry collection, Fretwork, is quite autobiographical. What can you do with autobiographical material in poetry that can't be done in a prose memoir?
You can tell the story more succinctly. People have asked me why I like poetry. I said, 40 lines, you're in, you're out, you're done. This scares the bejesus out of me. I can't do that. I think you're able to distill a story so that you find its real essence and what are the most important things that you're trying to convey. Maybe not the most important things in the story, but what you as the author allow to come out of the story. So I think that's how I prefer to do it that way than, you know, the long prose, or I might have to tell things I really don't want to tell.
Well, Lorraine, as most of us know, Father's Day is Sunday, and few writers have dealt with fathers and coping with their loss as you have. We just heard. I've noticed recently, too, though, that a lot of British and American detective shows I watch, such as Broadchurch and Bosch, feature a father navigating a difficult relationship with his daughter. What makes the father-daughter relationship so special and so potentially fraught? And why do you think it seems to have come to the fore lately?
For my dissertation, I will.
Yeah, well, that's an easy one.
That's
Yeah,
an easy
just
question.
a simple question.
It's just a simple question. I think it's coming to the forefront. I'll start with the back. I think it's coming to the forefront more now because it's finally culturally acceptable for us to see fathers parenting. And they're allowed to be, like, I'm not familiar with Broadchurch, but in Bosch, you know, he's the primary caregiver for his daughter, especially after his wife was shot. Sorry, I spoiled less, sorry. And so he's the one in charge of doing that in a very flawed way, but he's there, and you can feel that. And I think, you know, 20 years ago, you saw the men in other roles in pop culture. And I think we've seen, in my perspective, a good shift in seeing that being able to be much more publicly, you know, demonstrated. In terms of the fraughtness of the father-daughter relationship, well, holy moly. If you remove, you know, truly horrible fathers, you know, truly abusive fathers, truly neglectful fathers, then you've just got, you know, regular people doing the best that they can. And there's a great poem. Keith, who is it? Who's the author of They Fuck You Up, Your Mom and Dad? Is it
Philip Levine?
Philip Levine, maybe? There's like 12 English majors in it. Philip Levine. Anyway, the lines are, one of the lines are, they fuck you up, your mom and dad, they don't mean to, but they do. And I think, like, within the best intentions, there's always going to be, you know, things that you pass on to your children that you don't mean to. But in terms of the father-daughter specifically, daughters learn how to relate to men through their relationship with their father. regardless of what gender identity they might be or what sexuality they might be. That relationship is so key in helping them differentiate and know how to be part of that other world. And what can happen so frequently is the father will push the daughter away because of obviously the taboos of, I don't want to even be perceived of having any sort of impropriety with my daughter, you know. And then you have this child who was bouncing on your lap at 7, 8, 9 years old, and suddenly, you know, you're separated like that. And the child doesn't understand, you know, kind of what has happened. When the father is absent, so in Lost Fathers I deal with incarceration, abandonment, long-term illness, sudden loss, a variety of different ways that a father could be absent from the family. In adolescence, in particular, that individuation process is key. The daughter is on her way to becoming an adult. That person who traditionally navigated the exterior world while the mother navigated the internal world is gone. And so that throws that, you know, kind of in a, you know, and then the mother-daughter thing is such a mess that the father-daughter thing
That's
is
another
like
book I'll take.
Mother-daughter.
Well, and Lynn, in fretwork, your own adoptive father plays a significant role. Actually, your real biological father does too, in many of the poems. And so how would you answer the same question I just posed to Lorraine? How do you feel this father-daughter relationship works?
Well, the fretwork was the first time I had written about my birth father, who I never knew. And it suddenly occurred to me, well, then write that, the fact that you didn't know him. But it did strike me that the specter of not knowing him has played as large a part in my life. Who was he? I didn't read the poem, but there's a poem that talks about, addresses my birth mother, saying, did you even tell him that you were pregnant? I have no idea, because I didn't meet her, but didn't find her answers completely believable. So I think it was interesting to hear you read that, because I thought, you know, there is a lot more literature about this father-daughter relationship. When it exists, when it doesn't exist, it's a very dominant trope, I think, for many women, and in a variety of ways, 100 different ways. Whether you lose them young, I was a little older than you were when I lost my adoptive father, but it definitely stays in you in a way that shocks you sometimes. You're just surprised at how that relationship, and all I could think of to do was try to write my way through it. Someone asked me, they said, are you done with it now? And I said, no, the poems keep coming. So.
And as we all learn as poets, you just say thank you.
Thank
Even
you.
if it's not what you want to write, you just take it.
Just take it.
Well, you each, as we heard, deal with difficult subjects in your most recent, latest work. Lorraine, you confront an illness, obviously, and Lynn, you the circumstances of your adoption. How did you each decide to take on and share such personal and sensitive aspects of your lives, to just put them out there publicly? Either one of you, take it away, whoever. Both of you.
Yeah. I never told anyone everything before in my life. I spent my whole, for those of you out there who are teachers, we teach so we don't have to share. When you lead the group, you can let everyone else do their thing, and you're all like, I got this and that. And people think they know you, but they don't know you. When you're a therapist, the same thing. They come to tell you their stuff, they think they know you, but they don't know. And getting cancer, when I woke up after whatever had been post-op, first thing I did was felt to see if I had a bag, and then the second thing I did was see if I actually knew who I was and like I could recognize things. And the thought that was so prevalent in my head was, what have I refused to feel? And so that was sort of the thesis question. And I didn't start actually writing the book for probably a year, but the whole year, the major recovery year, I was taking notes and journaling and drawing, doing all kinds of different stuff. I didn't really know what I was going to do, but that was the thing. Because cancer is not a thing, no matter what the prognosis is, and no matter what your current state with it is, it doesn't ever go away. It's a shadow that's always there, and whether it's cancer or not, what it really is your immortality. And having a cancer diagnosis just makes you have to look at it all the time. Every time you go to the lab, every time you go to a scan, every time you feel something weird, every time you're like, is this menopause or is this something I should worry about? And you don't really know. And so I also became really afraid that if I didn't say everything that I had been holding back in this book, I would die without saying it. And that felt like a waste of life. So that was the motivation.
And how did you decide to share this whole, two-family, odyssey that you had?
Yeah, I think that I had been struggling for a long time with my parents, my mom in particular, who had her own issues, and she passed along, of feeling that and was told actually, many times, that I need to be grateful for being adopted, which I was and I am. I'm very cognizant of what some of the alternatives might have been if I had not been chosen. I was about 2, which was a little older, especially at that time, than most people want an infant, a month, 2 months, 6 months. I was 2. That I should be grateful for this, and I am. But there was never any space to be angry, to be frustrated, to be confused, to be curious. And so I started kind of writing about it, but I didn't feel comfortable sharing it. I was a little embarrassed, and I thought people would think I was ungrateful. But the older I got, it just was kind of boiling up in me. And similar to you, I'm not a teacher, but I do lead a lot of workshops, and I'm always telling the participants, you share your work. Tell us what go there, right? And so I felt a little, duplicitous of saying, but I am not going to go there. So I finally said, screw it. Now the truth is, both of my parents and my birth mom have passed, and that's given me a certain amount of freedom. But I also recognize in a variety of ways people go through separations either from their families or whatever, and it's been surprising to me the number of people that come up to me and said, I didn't have exactly your experience, but I had something similar. And so it did make me feel like, well, poor little Lynn is out there in the world by herself. And I'm just saying things finally that I feel, like you said, not to waste it, to share it, and to say, this is the whole of me. I think there was a half of me that was existing for a long time that people didn't want to hear about your birth mother or your birth father because you have such a wonderful family. That is true. But it's also true that, and then when I met my birth mother, and I have 7 cousins, and now, I have this other family. And as I told my adopted mother, you can't expect me not to want to know about it. It just isn't normal to me that you would think the child would just say, oh, well, I don't care about this. Some children do, and that's fine. But for those of us that are at least curious and possibly more, I think it was just something that I had to do.
Well, Lorraine, as you mentioned, this is a speculative memoir. And you take some serious creative risks in terms of the way you approach and format this material. Why did you decide to deviate so much from the standard memoir approach? Since you teach the memoir class here.
I don't anymore, but I don't know how to exist in the world without the things that I see that other people don't see. That's the way that I have always existed in the world. I am Southern, my family is deeply Southern. We have ghosts in the trees, we have ghosts in cemeteries, we have ghosts in the house, we have ghosts, it's like every, you know, my mother's family is from Finland. They were, her mother was, my mother's mother was a fortune teller and a psychic and an alcoholic. And when I try to write straight, it's almost like when I try to write straight, I feel like I'm holding back the best of me and the part of me that would make me stand out to a reader. And I read Carol Maso's book, The Art Lover, when I was in my early 20s. That book is finally being re-released. Do you know Carol Maso's work at all? Oh, she's amazing. And The Art Lover was, they called it experimental then, which meant nobody reads it and they don't know where to put it on the thing. And it was, you know, but the book was about the death of her friend from AIDS. So it was took place in the 80s. And it included a play format. It included song lyrics. It included maps of the stars. It included a fiction narrative. It included a, you know, and I read this, and this was before I went to graduate school, and I was like, oh my God, writing can do this. And then I went to graduate school, and I read Hemingway. And I said, well, shit. Because we weren't studying Carol Mason, we were studying Hemingway. And we were studying other things, and I tried to write stories of war, and I tried to write stories of outside. I'm not an outside person. Going outside and camping and doing crap like that, and like being with the bears, and you know, all these things, because that was what was selling, and that was what was being put up as great literature. And Carol Maso was teaching as an adjunct at the University of Arizona. She's now at Brown College. She's a tenured professor at Brown College. I had the privilege of hearing her read when I was at the University of Arizona. But then I went through academia and forgot I could do what Carol Maso showed me I could do. And then after cancer, I went back and reread it and was like, damn bitch. You know, like I knew what I needed to do 25 years ago, and I let other people tell me that it wasn't right, that it was woman's literature. It was too experimental. It was not marketable. It was not mainstream. It was not the kind of stories that anyone would want to hear. And so when you want to sell books, you take that in. And I think a lot of my work that has not been successful was because I tried to be what other people wanted me to be. And like I said earlier, with Constellation of Ghosts, it's like, this is 1000% me. I have held, I kid you not one thing back, not one thing. And so if I die tomorrow, there's a PDF of it floating around. You can read it, you'll know everything. There's nothing left. Because I want now to always live empty in that way. And so that form I needed to be able to bring in all those aspects. I like lyric essays. I think they're fabulous. But I needed the mythology, and I needed the art, and I needed the other, I needed the ghosts, and I needed the ghosts to be valid and not something that gets put on a weird shelf. I needed to normalize my ghosts because I believe everybody's got them. They've just forgotten how to talk about them.
Great. Well, speaking of experimentation, Lynn, you experiment often with poetic form. How do you decide the shapes of your poems? How do you decide what form a poem is going to take, if in fact it's going to take a form?
Well, I think I had the benefit of not being an academic, of not having an MFA or a PhD. I don't all hiss at once, I'm a lawyer by training. My mother said, you're going to be a what? A poet? What's wrong with you? So it has given me a certain amount of freedom because I didn't have that, let's all read whoever is the poet du jour, and everybody has to write like that. So what I did, because I said after law school I would never go back to school, was a lot of what I know about poetry is because I just try to read as much poetry as I possibly can. And when I find something in a form that I really like, I try to store that away. I can file on my computer. But I guess I didn't feel the constraint that I probably would have felt if I had gotten a degree in literature. That is not to say that it was not a wonderful degree. Just for me, it wasn't what I wanted. But in specific answer to your question is, what I've been doing for maybe the last 5 years or so is literally writing margin to margin, and then letting the poems tell me what shape they want. Now that's not to say that I don't sit down sometimes and say, gee, I'd like to write a sonnet or villanelle or whatever. But I find that not imposing Lynn on whatever words are coming out of me leads to a more interesting poem, because I haven't predetermined it's an X, Y, or Z. It's an idea that I have, and I'm just going to jot down some ideas. And the poem sometimes will say, please take me home to sonnet land. And I say, all right, we'll give that a shot. Doesn't always work. But that frees me up to go back and say, so what do you think? What do you think, guys? So it's intentional sometimes, but frequently not.
Well, we have a lot of writers, I am assuming, in the audience tonight. So let's talk about when the writing just doesn't come, when it doesn't flow. In other words, writer's block.
There is no such thing.
No. Lorraine, you've written an entire book about it, you know. What prompted that book, and can you describe the condition and your favorite technique to overcome it? Buy the book again. This is another one. You gotta buy the whole book.
It was another bit of cosmic irony that was the book that came out in May 2016. And I would have had cancer then, but I didn't know it. I was diagnosed in February of 2017. And the key premise in On Being Stuck is to essentially befriend the block, to move into the block, to use active imagination, to dialogue with it, to ask it what it needs, to try to identify what format it is. Is it a craft-based block, meaning you're trying to do something with your piece that you don't yet have the craft skills to do, the technical understanding to do, and so a way to unblock that is to go back and learn more technical skills, or the more common one really, because that's learnable, is how are you getting in your own way? What is coming up that your writing is asking you to do that you are resisting doing or saying? And those tools, slightly altered, were the primary tools I used to address cancer and to work with cancer as an entity, and to try to integrate cancer into me rather than be at war with cancer. I could not find a way in my body to be angry at it, to fight it, to resist it, because I really believe what you resist just gets stronger. And I felt like I needed to find a way to make friends with it, and by making friends with it, I needed to figure out what it was asking me to learn, and what it was asking me to understand about myself. And if I could understand those things, then perhaps it could dissolve, on its own. And that's essentially the same technique in the book on writer's block. It's like moving into that thing, finding its gift, finding its question of you. Why is this showing up for you right now? What is it about? And I'm not at all saying causes your illness. I'm not saying that crap at all. But like, what is it in this thing that has shown up for you that can help you? And then really kind of no matter what the end game is, you have grown. And so I think that's what sustained me through the worst stuff that illness.
Well, a different kind of writer's block can sometimes come from having life get in the way. And you had, as you mentioned, you were a high-powered lawyer, and she was.
Medium.
Okay, medium power, yeah. Yeah, she was only like an orange alert lawyer, And so you had to deal with, as I said, life getting in the way or other forms of poetic dry spells. So how did you get past them and keep going? I know there's the lure of the big money from poetry.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
It's all about
that
money.
keeps all of us going.
All about the
But-
money. One of my brothers said, "Don't you have a novel in you?" Oh, seriously? Wow.
So how do you deal with
Yeah,
when you're not writing?
I think I came to poetry, what I call seriously. I'd always been scribbling since I was a kid, as many writers do. They go back and look at their lives. But when I seriously started writing poetry, I was older than my contemporaries. I was a little late to the game. My first book didn't come out until I was 50. So I decided, with respect to writer's block, I didn't have any time for it. There's a wonderful poet not with us anymore, Carolyn Kaiser, and someone said, "Oh, Miss Kaiser, when you're writing poems, do you send them out?" She said, I write a draft and then I put it in the drawer for 2 years and let it kind of marinate. I said, "I'm an old woman. I do not have 2 years to put a poem in the drawer. I need to write it right now." So I kind of made an affirmative decision that I wasn't having it. I just wasn't having it. But on those occasions when I'm really struggling, I copy out longhand, sometimes type, other people's poems. Because when I do that, I learn more than just taking it in, reading it. I'm paying even more attention than you would think I was already doing by reading it on the page. Like, why is this line break? Why this word? I mean, I literally am writing it out as though I was them, and literally will walk away from doing that with 10 different ideas. So I'm kind of a stubborn, I'm not having it kind of gal. And I just decided I'm too old to have writer's block. It's boring. I'm just not going there. But what do you do as a practical matter? Because there are times when you just feel, and kind of, I like what you're saying about embracing it. If I don't write for a week, I don't write for a week. Nobody's going to shoot me. It's not like they're paying me millions of dollars waiting for my next book. So if I can't do it, I can't do it. But then I find something else to do. I'll write a book review, or I'll just copy a poem that I admire and really try to understand what did that person do, or any other little distraction to make me forget that I'm not writing. And then the next thing I know, I'm writing.
Great. How about questions from you? Anybody here have something you would like to ask these two fantastic authors? I couldn't have asked them all.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Lorraine, I'm dying of curiosity. Why the Raven?
Honestly, it was a dream. But of course, ravens are symbolically the bridge between the world. It's so much of a cliche. I always couldn't stand it. And Prescott's full of them. And so I have scenes where they're in my backyard, and my dad's in my backyard as the raven, and it's very part of what would actually be there. But that was the voice that started to come. That was the form that started to come, and it did arrive first as a dream. And I tried to make it something less freaking obvious, but that was what it kept kind of coming back to.
Great. Other questions? That's it? Just one? I thought you had something.
Thank you both so much. What an incredible, incredible evening. I appreciated both of the different things that you brought to us tonight. I am kind of like you, not a rule follower, or I almost go the opposite direction of that, especially with my writing. And as a result of that, I have you know, some things I really like about that, and other things about craft and that kind of thing that I don't really know. I love writing poetry, and I've written quite a bit of it. I want to put together a chapbook. I have no idea what you do, you know, how you figure that out and what you do.
Jim, you're on. So I reminded Jim earlier today that when I was putting together my first full-length collection, Beg No Pardon, a gentleman that Jim and I both know well, David St. John, wonderful poet, if you don't know him, seek him out, said, Lynn, you have poems, just put together a book. I said, is that how it works? Isn't there some kind of plan? He said, oh, just look at them and put them together. So I probably had about 60, 70 poems. I looked at them, and they weren't going together. Jim Nuttall, brilliant man that he is, said, well, you've done poetry readings, maybe a standard one might be 15 poems. He said, and you know that usually if you're wanting to lead your audience, you have an arc in those poems, trying to make sure the audience is following you. He said, do that 3 times. So you figure 15 poems, that's 45 poems. But that I could manage. So let's say that your chapbook is 25 poems long. Don't think about 25 poems. Think about 10 or 12 poems and how they fit together. Take the other 10 or 12 poems, see how they fit together. Then you can start to kind of move things in and out. And always, always remember there is no right answer. Because someone will read your book and say, well, I would have started with the poem on page 12. That's your strongest poem. Write and put it together the way you were happy with. Because at the end of the day, if you're happy with it, people will be happy with it because you'll be selling it that way. Selling in the bigger sense of the word selling. But yes, I credit Jim. Every time I get that question, I always say, Jim Nuttall gave me the spark to say, if you can't handle 60 poems, maybe you can handle 10, 12, or 14.
I think I can.
Yes. You're welcome. Thank you, Jim.
Lorraine, and ditto, it was just wonderful. I'm so glad things were, that I could come here tonight. It's very inspiring. So Lorraine, how different, if at all, was the book that you wrote from the one you thought you were going to write?
The one that I thought I was going to write didn't have the parts that work. The one that I thought I was going to write was, I guess about 6 months after I was out of the hospital, I was like, I'm never going to write again. I don't have anything left to write. Like I'm, you know, and of course, part of healing is creative energy and like, you know, all of that, but I was like, oh, I've never gone this long without writing anything. Like I'm broken. And so, so I found a woman named Chelsea Clammer, who's a phenomenal essayist. Her book Circadian is really making a splash. And so I emailed her and I'm like, hey, can I work with you? And so, so every month I sent her an essay. And then, and this got me at least writing, because if I'm sending something to someone and I'm giving them money, I'm gonna write something. So I sent her stuff, and then probably 6 or 7 months later, that's when the Raven Dream happened. And I'm like, I don't even know if Chelsea can help. She's an essay. She's a very lyric, she's an essayist. Like she is. And I'm like, I got this weird voice. It's kind of like half iambic pentameter and half like this thing, and like it's this. And she's like, cool, send it. And when she read the first part of the Raven, she emailed me. She actually texted me with this gigantic Bitmoji. She's like, you found your book. And I had been afraid to send it because I thought it was so. One, I thought it was so weird. 2, I thought it wasn't gonna be what she would like. You know, and it was almost like, okay, got that piece, and then I knew I couldn't weave that into lyric essays. And then it was honestly a therapy session where the therapist I work with, I don't do, we don't do talk therapy. She does something called the Body Method of Guided Imagery, which is a Jungian-based music therapy. And what you do is you sort of, you have an intention of what you want to address, whether it's, you know, it can be something specific about a relationship, or it can be something about your body, or whatever. And then there's, you know, she's very trained in how to select music to facilitate the journey. And then you're using your own imagery to address your own intention. And one of my intentions was, I knew I had like all this Raven piece, and I had all these lyric essays, and I didn't know what to do with them. And my question was, how the hell do I structure my book? And it came to me in a 45-minute therapy session. And once I got that together, it's like, where's my book? I used so much of I brought so much of my unconscious conscious to create the book. And I have not ever done it so consciously, if that makes sense. I put that together.
Any other questions? Okay, well then, let us thank profusely our two authors, Lynn Thompson and Lorraine